The planet Earth was no longer the gleaming beacon of peace and diplomacy it once was. In the years since the war had begun, it had become a scarred and battle-hardened world, unrecognizable from the utopian ideal humanity had once aspired to. The galaxy had seen genocide after genocide, other species wiped out by forces beyond their control, and Earth had watched, helpless, until the unthinkable happened. The Zrathi, a warlike alien race known for their brutal tactics and deep-rooted hunger for conquest, had invaded the peaceful planet of Vitaris. They swept across it like a storm, annihilating everything in their path. Whole cities were leveled, and millions of innocent lives were extinguished in the blink of an eye. The brutality of the attack was staggering, a reminder that no place in the universe was truly safe. But there was one thing the Zrathi didn't understand. Humanity had never been complacent when pushed to the edge. They had learned to survive against impossible odds and had become a force to be reckoned with. Earth, tired of watching helplessly as its allies suffered, had responded with a fury the galaxy had never seen. In the command center of Earth's flagship, the Regent, General Maria Hayes stared out at the holographic display in front of her. The starry expanse stretched out, endless and unforgiving. But this wasn't just any battlefield. This was the beginning of Earth's retaliation. They had reached the tipping point. Earth had always been known for its diplomacy, for its civilized approach to conflicts. But that was no more. "We're ready, General," said Lieutenant David Carter, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed the pressure building up inside him. He stood at attention beside Maria, monitoring the fleet's readiness for the upcoming strike. The tactical map on the screen showed Earth's fleet, a formidable armada of warships, some still under construction, but ready to act. Thousands of soldiers, sailors, and pilots had prepared for this moment. The Zrathi would soon feel humanity's fury. Maria took a deep breath. She had been through countless battles before, but this was different. This wasn't just a military mission. This was a statement. "We've given them every opportunity to make peace, Lieutenant. They've rejected it. Now we show them what happens when you cross Earth." The fleet's commander nodded. He had been one of the first to call for aggressive retaliation when the Zrathi had destroyed an Earth colony on the outskirts of the Sol system. Now, here they were, about to strike at the heart of an enemy who had no interest in diplomacy. The moment they had all feared had arrived. The moment humanity would stop being civilized and show the galaxy that they were no longer a species to be underestimated. "Sir," another officer, Lieutenant Kira Mendez, called from the communications station, "we've intercepted a message from the Zrathi. They're sending their demands. They want Earth to surrender unconditionally or face annihilation. They don't know what's coming." Maria's jaw tightened. Let's make sure they don't live to regret those words. As the officers around her got to work, preparing for the offensive, Maria stepped away from the tactical map and looked out at the stars. Her thoughts turned to her family. She hadn't seen them in years. The war had taken everything from her: friends, comrades, and now even the very notion of peace. She wondered if they would ever know the world that existed before the war. "Are you sure about this, General?" Lieutenant Carter asked quietly, walking up to her. Maria didn't take her eyes off the holographic star map. "The Zrathi will not stop. They've gone too far, and I'm not about to let them destroy another peaceful planet. If we don't make a stand now, we risk losing everything." Carter looked at her, then glanced at the soldiers gathered in the command center. His eyes filled with a hint of doubt, but he nodded. "Understood, ma'am. I'll relay the orders." Maria watched him leave, her mind still spinning. The stakes had never been higher. The strategy was simple. Take the fight directly to the Zrathi, hit them where it hurt, and make them understand that humanity's tolerance had run out. There would be no mercy. The civilians, the families of Vitaris, none of them could be saved. But Maria would make sure the enemy paid for every life lost. The sound of the klaxon filled the air, a sharp, relentless sound. The fleet was now in motion. The Regent rumbled as its engines powered up, its shields flickering with readiness. The space outside the command center windows was filled with the silhouettes of warships, dozens of them, ready to descend upon the Zrathi like a swarm of hornets. Maria returned to her command chair. "Lieutenant Carter," she said, her voice firm and unwavering, "send the signal. Earth is done being civilized. Let's show them what happens when you threaten humanity's future." As Carter moved to send the orders, Maria's mind was flooded with thoughts of the war ahead. The losses, the battles, the countless sacrifices they would all have to make. She would carry the weight of it all, but it was a burden she would bear gladly. The moment of retaliation had arrived. As the fleet jumped to hyperspace and the stars stretched into lines of light before them, Maria knew the battle would be brutal. The Zrathi might have underestimated humanity's ability to endure, but now they would learn the truth. Now, we stop being civilized. With those words, the fleet plunged into the depths of space, heading toward the Zrathi's stronghold, ready to unleash the full fury of Earth's wrath. The war had begun. Earth's fleet, now fully in motion, sailed through the stars at breakneck speed. Every vessel, from the massive dreadnoughts to the nimble attack ships, was geared for one purpose: destruction. The Zrathi had made their first mistake by underestimating humanity's ability to respond when pushed too far. Now, Earth's retaliation was about to hit them with the full force of what they had set in motion. General Maria Hayes stood at the bridge of the Regent, her hands clasped behind her back. The crew moved like clockwork, each officer fully aware of the high stakes. She could feel the tension radiating throughout the room as they approached the Zrathi's outer defense line. This would be no easy fight. They were preparing to take on an enemy that had conquered dozens of worlds with relentless precision. But Maria knew this time would be different. Humanity had been made to suffer for too long. The comms officer's voice crackled over the speakers. "General, we're nearing the Zrathi's first defense perimeter. They're deploying interceptors, but they've not yet mobilized the full fleet." Maria's lips curled into a grim smile. "Let them bring everything they have. We'll show them what happens when you provoke Earth." The battle ahead wasn't just about vengeance, it was a statement. Humanity had always prided itself on its civility, on diplomacy and peaceful resolution. But that time was gone. The Zrathi had wiped out entire civilizations without remorse, and now they were going to feel the wrath of a species that had finally had enough. "Lieutenant Carter," Maria said, turning to her trusted second-in-command, "prepare the first wave. No mercy. I want everything we've got hitting them at once." "Aye, General." Carter didn't flinch. He understood the mission, as did everyone on this ship. This wasn't about saving the innocent anymore. This was about ensuring no other species could ever think to do what the Zrathi had done. As they neared the Zrathi stronghold, Maria's mind raced. The galaxy had seen peace for too long. Humanity's rise to power had been swift, but their rise to dominance would be unstoppable. She wasn't just fighting to win this war. She was fighting to send a message to the universe. Earth would not be intimidated anymore. "We've reached the firing range," the tactical officer called out. "Shields at maximum, and weapons are online." Maria turned her gaze to the holoscreen in front of her, where the Zrathi fleet began to appear. The Zrathi's ships were sleek and heavily armed, designed for speed and overwhelming firepower. They had already begun launching attack crafts, small, fast ships designed to strike with precision. Yet, despite the technological advantage they had, Earth had one thing they didn't: resolve. "Open fire," Maria commanded. The Regent's guns roared to life as waves of plasma bolts shot toward the incoming Zrathi ships. The space around them erupted in brilliant flashes of light as the first wave of enemy interceptors was obliterated by the concentrated fire. It was a satisfying sight for Maria, but she knew this was only the beginning. As the enemy ships scattered, the larger warships came into view. The real fight was about to begin. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," she barked as the Regent shuddered under the impact of a few stray shots. The enemy was retaliating, their ships firing in sync, attempting to overwhelm Earth's fleet with their advanced weaponry. But Earth's ships were built for resilience, and they had something the Zrathi didn't: an unshakable will to survive. As they approached the heart of the enemy fleet, Maria's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden flash of an enemy flagship breaking through the debris. It was massive, twice the size of any Earth vessel, and it immediately launched a wave of devastating energy blasts. One of them hit the Regent's left flank, sending shockwaves throughout the ship. The lights flickered, and the entire bridge was shaken. "We've lost shield power on the port side," the engineer yelled over the comms. "Divert all power to shields, now," Maria shouted, gripping her chair as the ship swerved to avoid the next volley of fire. The battle was escalating fast, and the enemy flagship was no longer holding back. The Zrathi had clearly underestimated humanity's response, and now they were facing the consequences. The Regent fired back with everything it had, but the enemy flagship's shields absorbed most of the damage. Their tactics were far more coordinated than Earth had anticipated. "We're outnumbered, General," Lieutenant Mendez called, her voice grim. "The Zrathi fleet has deployed its full force. We've only taken out a third of their interceptors. We need backup." Maria's pulse quickened, but she didn't hesitate. She knew that in war, hesitation could mean death. She turned to Carter. "Activate the secondary fleet. Get the reserves in the fight. We will not let them regroup." "Understood, General," Carter replied, his voice filled with determination. As he relayed the orders, Maria looked out at the battle before her. Her soldiers, her people, were fighting for their lives. Earth's retaliation was now in full swing, but the outcome wasn't guaranteed. Yet Maria couldn't help but feel the stirring sense that this was the moment they had all been waiting for. They had crossed the line, and they weren't going to stop until they had made the Zrathi understand. Earth would never fall again. This was a fight to the death, and Maria would do whatever it took to see it through. As the battle raged on, she couldn't help but feel the heat of the explosions and the urgency of their mission. Earth had no choice but to win this war. There could be no negotiation, no treaty. The Zrathi would fall, or Earth would burn trying. In that moment, as the chaos of the battle swirled around her, General Maria Hayes knew the galaxy would never forget what Earth was capable of when pushed too far. It wasn't about being civilized anymore. Now, it was about survival. And survival was something humanity had mastered better than anyone else. The battle had spiraled into a full-blown inferno, and the Regent had become a beacon of humanity's fury. Earth's fleet had expanded, and now the massive warships moved with precision, tearing through the Zrathi forces. But the Zrathi flagship, an enormous vessel adorned with the scars of countless battles, continued to hold its ground. It was clear that this would be no easy victory. The Zrathi were desperate, and their flagship was prepared for a fight unlike any Earth had encountered. Maria stood at the helm, her fists clenched as she watched the swirling chaos on the view screen. Hundreds of smaller ships zipped across the battlefield, their energy weapons lighting up the space between them. It was a deadly dance, and each move was critical. For every Zrathi ship that fell, two more seemed to take its place. "They've adapted," Lieutenant Mendez said, her voice low with concern. "They've pulled back their interceptors, focusing all fire on our larger ships. Their flagship is taking on our entire fleet." Maria's eyes narrowed. The Zrathi weren't just fighting to win, they were fighting to break Earth's spirit. If the flagship could survive long enough, it would rally the remaining forces and crush Earth's resolve. But Maria wasn't going to let that happen. Not now, not after all the lives lost on Vitaris. "Lieutenant Carter," Maria said, her voice unwavering, "I need you to come up with a way to pierce that flagship's defenses. I don't care what it takes. We're taking that ship down." "Yes, ma'am," Carter replied. His fingers moved across the control panel, quickly calculating their chances. "The flagship's shields are formidable, but we've detected a weak spot along the lower port side. It's risky, but if we can fire directly into the breach, we might be able to disable their weapon systems." Maria nodded. "Then let's do it. All units, focus fire on that weak point. If we can disable their weapons, the rest of the fleet should fall." The fleet's warships adjusted their positions, now moving with deadly intent. The battle was no longer about strategy, it was about sheer will. Earth had long relied on its advanced technology and intelligence, but this fight wasn't just technical. This was about a statement that no matter the odds, humanity would never stop fighting. Maria's fingers gripped the armrests of her command chair as the countdown began. Every second was crucial. The Regent shuddered as its weapons powered up, and the entire ship seemed to hold its breath. The bridge crew was silent. There was no need for words now. They all knew what was at stake. "Ready, General," Carter said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. The Regent's main guns roared to life, sending a concentrated burst of energy straight toward the Zrathi flagship's weak spot. The beam of light streaked through space, striking the breach with incredible force. For a moment, it seemed as though nothing would happen. Then, the flagship's shields flickered, and the blast erupted, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The Zrathi flagship staggered under the impact, its hull groaning as the shields collapsed. The flagship's engines flared, struggling to keep it in position, but it was clear that they had inflicted serious damage. "We've got them," Maria whispered. The words felt surreal, as if they were still too far from victory, but the reality was sinking in. "All ships, fire at will. Let's finish this." With the flagship's defensive systems temporarily disabled, the Earth fleet focused all remaining firepower on the behemoth. Plasma blasts rained down, tearing into the massive ship's hull. The Zrathi flagship began to crumble under the onslaught, its weapons sputtering as its core destabilized. For a brief moment, Maria felt the weight of her own exhaustion, the toll that the war had taken on her. But there was no time for rest. They had come too far. "General, the enemy flagship is in critical condition," Lieutenant Mendez reported. "We've shattered their weapon systems, but they're trying to make a last-ditch escape maneuver. They're entering evasive pattern Theta 4. Maria's jaw clenched. The Zrathi had one last card to play, and she wasn't going to give them the chance. "Intercept their escape route. We can't let them escape." The Regent surged forward, its engines firing at full throttle. Earth's fleet closed in on the flagship, surrounding it in an impenetrable circle. The Zrathi flagship, now barely holding together, attempted to warp out of the system, but it was too late. With the combined firepower of Earth's warships, the final blow came. A cataclysmic explosion tore through the flagship, its massive form disintegrating in a burst of light. For a moment, everything went silent. The Zrathi fleet, now leaderless and broken, scattered in all directions. The battle was won. Maria sank back into her chair, letting out a long breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She could still feel the hum of the Regent beneath her feet, the weight of the war lifting just a little. But there was no time to celebrate. The fight wasn't over, and the war was still far from finished. "General, the fleet is reporting that all enemy ships have either been destroyed or are retreating," Mendez said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. Maria nodded, though her thoughts were elsewhere. There would be no time for celebration. They had won a crucial battle, but the war was far from over. The Zrathi were just one piece of a much larger conflict. This was a victory for Earth, but the galaxy was still watching, and humanity would need to remain vigilant. The ship's bridge began to hum with activity again as the crew resumed their tasks. The aftermath of the battle was evident. Debris floated through space, and the wreckage of the Zrathi ships slowly drifted away like the remnants of a shattered dream. But Earth had made its statement. They would no longer sit idly by while the galaxy bled. They would fight, and they would win. Maria stood up, the weight of command still heavy on her shoulders, but there was a flicker of pride in her eyes. Humanity had been pushed to the edge, and now they had shown the universe what they were capable of. "This is only the beginning," she whispered to herself, as the Regent sailed into the unknown reaches of space. The galaxy would soon understand that Earth had crossed the line, and it wasn't turning back.